So, the FAA has just dropped a critical update for anyone operating certain General Electric GE90 engines. We're talking about Airworthiness Directive 2025 25-07. In this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what this means for your fleet, from the root cause all the way to the specific actions you need to take. Right off the bat, the core message here is super clear. You've got a mandatory replacement of specific high-pressure turbine disks. And the stakes? Well, they couldn't be higher. This is all about preventing the catastrophic risk of an uncontained engine failure. It's about safety first and foremost. So, what led to this directive in the first place? Let's dig into the background here to really understand the why behind what the FAA is asking us to do. Okay, so the whole thing traces back to an investigation by General Electric. They discovered that a specific batch of powder metal, which was used to make these HPT disks, was suspected to be contaminated with iron. It might sound like a small material defect, but believe me, it has some pretty significant consequences. And you can see how this all connects in a kind of scary chain of events. It all starts with that little deficiency in the manufacturing process, which leads to the iron getting into the metal. From there, that defect shortens the material's fatigue life, which could then cause the disk to fracture way earlier than it should. And, the worst case scenario, an uncontained engine failure. And this really drives home just how serious this is. The FAA does not mince words here. This quote is pulled directly from the AD, and it spells out exactly what's at stake: uncontained debris, major engine damage, and even damage to the aircraft itself. This is precisely what the directive is designed to prevent. Okay, now for the big question on everyone's mind. Is your fleet impacted? This is where you really need to start paying close attention to the details. So this directive is targeting some of the real workhorses of the GE90 family. We're talking the GE90-90B, the 94B, the 110B1, and of course the 115B. If you've got any of these in your fleet, then yeah, this AD applies directly to you. Now this slide here shows you a few examples of specific part and serial numbers from the AD. But, and I can't stress this enough, this is just a snapshot. For the full, complete, definitive list, your teams absolutely must go to the official FAA AD and the GE Service Bulletin at References. That's your source of truth. It's non-negotiable for compliance. We've covered the why and the who, so now let's get into the nitty-gritty, the what and the when. This is all about the specific actions your maintenance and camo teams need to take. The directive basically breaks this down into 3 different situations. For any parts listed in Table 1 of the AD, the action is immediate. They have to be removed and replaced before the next flight. For the other affected disks, the deadline is either the next time they're exposed during maintenance, what's called piece part exposure, or a specific cycle limit, whichever one comes first. And that term, piece part exposure, is really key to understanding the timing here. The AD defines it very clearly for us. It's the moment the affected HPT disk is taken out of the engine and completely disassembled. That is the event that starts the compliance clock for that specific part. Now, the FAA did build in a little bit of flexibility. There's a key provision here for certain HPT Stage 1 disks that are already over their cycle limit. For those, operators get a grace period of 50 additional flight cycles to get that replacement done. So what can you actually install as a replacement? Well, the rule is pretty simple. Any HPT disk is good to go as long as its part number and serial number do not show up on those affected lists in either the AD or the GE Service Bulletin. All right, let's just zoom out for a second. How do all of these technical actions actually fix the problem and restore the engine's airworthiness? This slide lays it out perfectly, a clear before and after. On one side, you've got this serious risk of a premature fracture, and on the other, you have that risk directly addressed by physically removing the suspect parts from the fleet. This is a textbook case of proactive safety management, ensuring continued airworthiness. Okay, so moving away from the hangar floor, this directive obviously has some pretty big impacts on operations and the business side of things. Let's look at the executive summary. All right, let's talk about the financial impact, because these are some big numbers. The FAA estimates that replacing just a single HPT Stage 1 disk will cost over $932,000 per engine. That's a huge number that's going to hit the budget for sure. And for the HPT Stage 2 disk, the FAA's estimate comes in at just over $187,000 per engine. It's really interesting to see that huge cost difference between the two stages, right? That's a key detail for your budgeting teams to keep in mind. So let's boil all this down to the key operational takeaways. First, there's a real immediate grounding risk for aircraft with those most critical parts. Second, you've got to plan for engine removal and downtime for the others. Third, your procurement teams need to get moving on sourcing compliant replacement parts like yesterday. And finally, an interesting note, the FAA actually estimates a pretty low initial impact on the US fleet, thinking only about 2 engines are affected right now. All right, let's bring it all home. What are the final takeaways, and what are your immediate next steps to make sure you're in compliance? This table sums it all up beautifully. Who's affected? Operators of these specific GE90 engines. What do you have to do? Remove and replace the affected HPT disks. And when does it need to be done? Either immediately before the next flight or by those specified limits. Simple as that. And we have to end on this because it is the single most important takeaway of all. While this explainer gives you a good breakdown for 100% full compliance, your teams must work directly from the official FAA 80 text and the GE service bulletins. They are the final word, period. For more explainers like this, subscribe to the Aeropoda YouTube channel.